Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi was born on the world of Stujin and was the last Padawan of the infamous Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. A hero of the Naboo crisis, Kenobi was elevated to the rank of Jedi Knight after Jinn's death. In accordance with his master's dying wish, Kenobi took the former slave Anakin Skywalker as his Padawan and trained him in the ways of the Jedi. A notable field agent of the Jedi Order, Kenobi was sent to the world of Kamino to investigate the assassination attempts on Senator Amidala. The investigation led Kenobi to discovering a plot by Count Dooku to instigate a galaxy-wide conflict between the Republic and the newly formed Confederacy of Independent Systems. One of the few survivors of the Battle of Geonosis, Kenobi would become one of 10 Jedi High Generals when the Order was thrust into military service during the Clone Wars. He would go on to lead Republic forces to victory at such notable battlefronts of Moonlist and Utapau, among others. He would defeat the most infamous Jedi killers of his day, such as Dirge, Asajj Ventress, Savage Opress, and General Grievous. His prowess in battle, coupled with his diplomatic skill, would earn him a seat on the Jedi Council, though his time on it would be cut short by the end of the Clone Wars, and the subsequent betrayal of his troops as a result of Order 66. Kenobi would survive the beginning of the Great Jedi Purge and would challenge Anakin Skywalker, now the newly appointed Sith apprentice Darth Vader, waging a titanic lightsaber battle that would end in Kenobi defeating his former Padawan, and leaving him to die on the edges of a lava river on the planet of Mustafar. Kenobi would then go into exile on Tatooine, where he would watch over the childhood of Vader's son, Luke Skywalker, living under the assumed name Ben Kenobi, would come out of exile to aid the Rebel Alliance in the fight against the Empire, sacrificing himself in order to let Luke and his compatriots escape the Death Star. Kenobi would go on to transcend the physical plane as a Force spirit, and would return periodically to guide Luke in his training to become a Jedi Knight. A female Togrutan, Shaak T, was appointed to the Jedi Council following the death of Master Yaddle on Muon in 26 BBY. One of the few survivors of the Battle of Geonosis, Shaak T was one of 10 Jedi High Generals when the Order was shoehorned into military service at the start of the Clone Wars, leading the Republic to victory on notable battlefronts such as Brental IV and Dagu, among others, along with surviving multiple engagements with the infamous CIS commander General Grievous. Rising to prominence as a noted Republic war hero, T was appointed as head of the defense of the Jedi Temple in 19 BBY, as Mace Windu led a Jedi strike team to kill Chancellor Palpatine, who had by then revealed his Sith identity to Anakin Skywalker. Though unable to stop the Temple's destruction when Order 66 was enacted, she did manage to hold off against the newly appointed Sith apprentice Darth Vader, while multiple Jedi escaped the Temple. She then managed to escape his clutches, going into hiding on Felucia, where she found time to begin training a new Padawan named Maris Brood. Surviving much of the Dark Times, T was eventually located by Darth Vader, who sent his assassin Galen Merrick to kill her. After a lengthy duel near the Ancient Abyss, a Mega Sarlacc that was used for sacrificial offerings by the natives, T was slain by Merrick. She was survived by her apprentice Maris Brood, who fell to the dark side after T's death and wreaked havoc across Felucia, until being targeted by Merrick as well. Hello YouTube, this is the Phoenix Exalt bringing you the next installment of my Versus series. For this analysis, I will be using Obi-Wan Kenobi during the time frame of Revenge of the Sith, and Shaak T from the time frame of the Force Unleashed novelization. I will be pulling from Legends continuity along with any canon materials that do not directly interfere with previously made Legends materials. Due to the fact that the Disney Story Group is going in a direction that is neither original nor creative, I will not be using canon as the main point of Star Wars media for my videos. As for the 2008 show, Star Wars The Clone Wars, I will be using the episodes, arcs, and tie-in materials that do not contradict or diminish the character's feats elsewhere in the Star Wars lore. As always, I own none of the characters, art, music, or other media depicted in this video, and all rights to them go to their respective companies. With that out of the way, I present to you Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Shaak Ti. If these two legendary Jedi Masters met on the battlefield, who would be the victor? Obi-Wan Kenobi was a human male in his mid to late 30s and was still well into his physical prime. Slim but muscular, he possessed extremely high levels of agility, speed, and stamina, capable of fighting hours on end with little to no rest. While he was not a muscular powerhouse, his strength was considerable. Kenobi's almost inhuman durability should also be taken into account. While Kenobi's capacity for taking physical pain might not be on the level of brute muscle tanks such as Darth Malgus or Savage Opress, it was easily comparable to the likes of Shaak Ti and Anakin Skywalker. He has survived being impaled with shards of glass, shot, burned with a lightsaber, blown up, gassed, crushed, and has even fought his way through over 30 armed guards and the Dark Jedi Asajj Ventress directly following months of agonizing Sith torture, which consisted of him being deprived of food and water, while being forced to wear a mask that dulled his senses and prevented him from calling on the Force to sustain himself, along with having maggots feasting on his innards. In short, Kenobi is a damaged sponge that won't go down easily. It's a death blow or nothing. Shaak Ti was a Togruta female, which by itself brought numerous advantages over most of her opponents. And while her exact age was never specified in any source, she was noted as being slightly older than Obi-Wan Kenobi, which would put her in the mid to late 50s range by the time of her death in 3 BBY. Given the fact that a Togrutan's average lifespan is around 94 years, and that the light side of the Force is known for its sustaining power, I think it's safe to assume that Ti was still in her physical prime when she fought Galen Merrick. A conclusion backed by how evenly the two were despite Merrick's relative youth. Native to the jungle world of Shilai, Togrutans were known for having superior strength, agility, and durability as compared to humans. While not a heavily armored muscle tank compared to the likes of Darth Malgus or Vader, Shaak Ti was easily compared to Kenobi or Skywalker. She has survived being buried under a mountain of rubble, has worked through being shot in the abdomen at point-blank range, has powered through repeated strikes from electro staffs, and has even continued fighting after having been stabbed in the gut by a lightsaber blade. Togrutans were further distinguished by having 2 hollow montrals protruding from their heads. These montrals were a tremendous asset when it came to personal combat, as they provided a form of passive echolocation. This gives Ti a heightened awareness during combat that projects a 360-degree view of her surroundings, allowing her to easily multitask between multiple opponents. In short, you're not finishing off Shaak Ti with a few superficial hits. This is a fairly close verdict despite initial appearances. The two combatants are roughly equal in durability, as while Togruta are more resilient than humans, Kenobi is not your average human, and is a certifiable damage sponge when it comes to physical strikes. Given that Kenobi's strength is not in the superhuman level, I will give Shaak Ti the edge in strength as well as agility. Togrutans do not have any natural weapons inherent to their species, and neither have any cybernetic implants that are known. The deciding factor for this verdict will be Shaak Ti's montrals, which allow her the passive form of echolocation. This ensures that it will be relatively impossible for Kenobi to sneak up on Shaak Ti in a physical contest, and so Shaak Ti gets the edge for physical abilities. As a Jedi apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi was one of the most gifted students of his generation, and a natural talent with the lightsaber. Taking full advantage of this natural aptitude, he developed into one of the greatest swords masters in galactic history, and was proclaimed by the Jedi Master Mace Windu as the greatest master of Form 3 Surisu of the era. The third form to be developed, Surisu was constructed in response to the widespread usage of energy-based weapons that rendered the forms of Makashi and Shi-Cho obsolete. It was built around tight, efficient movements intended to provide maximum defensive viability and combative longevity. Although it was originally intended solely for defense against blaster-wielding opponents, Surisu was eventually taken to the point where it was regarded that the true masters of the form were invincible to all combatants. Accordingly, Kenobi's technique was based around the core tenets of Surisu taken to the nth degree. He would use quick and precise movements and parries in order to dodge or block incoming strikes. In keeping with his form, Kenobi was a master of blast deflection unparalleled within his era. He has been described as walking through hornet swarms of blaster fire unscathed, and has even deflected a cannon shot from a vulture droid, a feat many Jedi regarded as impossible. As noted in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Kenobi's defense was great enough to effectively stonewall the era's reigning masters of Makashi, Djem-So, as well as block up to 20 strikes per second with nothing but the Force to guide his blade during his final duel with General Grievous. While it is true that Kenobi has been quoted saying that Surisu is the only form of which he feels proficient in, this is almost certainly an act of self-effacement. In his youth, Kenobi studied Ataru, no doubt at the direction of his master Qui-Gon Jinn, a noted master of the form. Kenobi would become a seasoned master of Ataru. His offense was quite varied, executing smooth transitions between power blows, sweeps, and precise cuts. He was also able to combine the tenets of both Surisu and Ataru. This was especially impressive because he was able to answer both weaknesses of the forms, Surisu's being a lack of offensive viability, and Ataru's lack of defensive viability. Kenobi also possessed a lethal proficiency with unarmed combat, flawlessly integrating physical strikes from the alternative martial art Taijutsu into his routine. Learning from his mistakes on Geonosis, he incorporated the tenets from multiple fighting forms in order to diversify his skill set, studying the forms of Shi-Cho, Shi-En, Naiman, and Jar-Kai dual-blade fencing. In keeping with the focus of Shi-Cho, Kenobi was devastating in battlefield engagements. While it is true that Count Dooku is quoted saying that his application of Shi-Cho was clumsy and unrefined, it was later revealed that Kenobi was deliberately using basic Shi-Chu and Ataru attacks as ploys to lure Dooku into a false sense of security, and as such, I believe that his application goes well beyond this assessment. Form 5 Shi-En was based around aim deflection on the battlefield, and on multiple occasions Kenobi has been seen employing Shi-En's reverse grip. As stated in the Jedi Path, Kenobi studied Naiman with the expressed intent of integrating force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences, a skill he would use to great effect during the Clone Wars. Jar-Kai was definitely the least developed of Kenobi's skills, though his absolute mastery of it was shown when he single-handedly took on both Darth Maul and Savage Opress in combat, and soundly defeated both. An active field agent and an acclaimed military general, Kenobi was regarded as one of the best strategic minds of his day, distinguished by his calm and calculating approach, and his reliance on deception and surprise tactics. He would apply these skills to combat effortlessly. He would be able to focus on the needs of the moment while maintaining a broad situational awareness, keeping opponents at arm's length with his impenetrable defense, and waiting until his opponent overextended himself, following up with a quick, precise, and lethal counter. Kenobi was also fond of using the environment to his advantage, controlling the fight to give himself the home field advantage. In a fight against an opponent he had either not dueled for many years, in the case of Count Dooku, or an opponent he had never faced before and had no knowledge of their preferred fighting style, he would begin with the basic and clumsy applications of Shicho and Ataru to lure his opponent into a false sense of security. Then, when he had sussed out his opponent's technique, or was forced on his back foot, he would begin to start using Surisu, gradually shifting more and more into his preferred form. He would then wait for an opening of which he would exploit, with either a quick slash of his blade or an integration of a telekinetic strike, followed up with a slash of his blade cutting down his opponent. Kenobi is, in my estimate, how one should handle themselves in combat. Instead of becoming a jack of all trades and master of none, Kenobi mastered a specific set of skills that allowed him to almost any scenario emerge victorious, or defeat any combatant he came across. Described as one of the most cunning Jedi of the Old Republic, Shaak Ti was one of the Order's premier swordswomen. During the Clone Wars, Shaak Ti would become one of the few Jedi to survive multiple confrontations with General Grievous. While not the victor on Hypori or Coruscant, it should be noted that during neither time was Shaak Ti operating under peak efficiency. During both cases, she was both previously injured and had already participated in a marathon battle before being engaged by Grievous. Possibly one of Shaak Ti's greatest showings was when she fought against an entire army of IG-100 Magna Guards, and putting a severe dent in their forces before being called away. A noted accomplishment, as even one Magna Guard was said to be more than a match for your typical Jedi Knight. T's final opponent would be Darth Vader's secret apprentice, Galen Marek, codenamed Starkiller at the time. While T never properly defeated Marek, the novelization of The Force Unleashed made it clear that she dominated the entire fight and practically gave the victory to Marek out of pity. During the entire duel, she only faltered when Marek managed to stab T in the gut with his lightsaber. However, the Force Unleashed novelization makes it clear that this feat came from luck on Marek's part and not from greater skill. Shaak Ti would even duel Darth Vader during Operation Nightfall, stalling his advance while giving other Jedi time to escape. Shaak Ti would stalemate Vader before fleeing due to the massive amount of clone troopers inside the temple, and the Force telling her that her destiny lied elsewhere. Holding off Vader, even pre-suit Vader, for any length of time is not a feat to be taken lightly, or replicated by many others. Shaak Ti would learn from others in her order and diversify her skill set, branching out rather than relying on a particular style to suit her combat needs. She would rely on a personal hybridization of Form 2 Makashi and Form 4 Ataru, her aptitude in the former having been directly compared to that of Count Dooku, who was the reigning master of Makashi at the time. Makashi was an old fencing style based around lightsaber dueling, and was at one point the most common form in the Order, but was rendered obsolete due to the widespread emergence of blaster technology. Ataru was an extremely aggressive form of lightsaber combat that is based around elaborate flourishes, extreme force-assisted acrobatics, and physical combat techniques. Extremely fluid and agile, Shaak Ti's saber offense was a mixture of the linear efficiency of Makashi and the maneuvers and acrobatics of Ataru. As with most Form 4 specialists, Shaak Ti possessed a lethal efficiency with unarmed combat, having been shown in multiple depictions as breaking battle droids' armor plating with a physical strike, one even decapitating a Magna Guard with her unarmored knee. Additionally, in the fight against the Magna Guard army, Shaak Ti showed her proficiency with Char-Kai dual-weapon fencing, wielding her own lightsaber as well as a captured Magna Guard electro staff. While capable of initiating a stonewall defense when necessary, Ti usually preferred to evade a foe's attacks rather than meet them head-on. T would rapidly contort her body in order to evade attacks before they were even dished out. When her environment was too confined to evade, T would rely on counters, using Makasi shunts and parries to stall an opponent's assault, and then immediately launching into a lethal counter-offensive. Speaking of the environment, Shaak T would use the environment to her advantage, guiding a fight to a location of her choice, and then capitalizing on the environment around her. In conclusion, Shaak T was a master-level duelist enforced by extreme situational awareness and exceptional tactical viability. This is an extremely difficult verdict to call, as both combatants are just so evenly matched in this category, but for entirely different reasons. Kenobi developed himself into the ultimate lightsaber tank, with the only being capable of overwhelming his defenses through sheer speed of attack is the cyborg General Grievous. Shaak T devoted herself to becoming one of the Jedi's most cunning duelists, who could run circles around some of the best of the Order. Therefore, this comes down to who can actually counter the other. Kenobi's defense is as perfect as one could get, and while Shaak T might be able to get around it with a trick or an especially careful probing offensive, she doesn't need to. Unlike the brash Anakin Skywalker, Shaak T will not take a wild flipping jump from the low ground to attempt to attack Kenobi. She will be careful, and all her attacks measured, and her defenses are more than sufficient to keep an offensive Kenobi at bay. Therefore, all Shaak T will have to do is wait out Kenobi, because while he has near limitless stamina, it does have a limit, and considering their roughly equal levels of durability, I do not foresee Kenobi being able to pull out a win against Shaak purely with his saber skills. Shaak T gets the edge in lightsaber dueling. Obi-Wan Kenobi was one of 4 long-term members of the Jedi Council, and as such was a legendary wielder of the light side of the Force. Numerous sources have credited Kenobi as being a wise and powerful Jedi Master, said to have an understanding of the Force only surpassed by Mace Windu and Grandmaster Yoda. As a Jedi Guardian, Kenobi was generally a combat specialist and a field agent. In keeping with this, most of his Force abilities centered around boosting his combat performance. Physical augmentation was his bread and butter, elevating his already considerable speed, strength, agility, reflexes, and stamina to the superhuman levels common to all Jedi. Obi-Wan Kenobi was a highly advanced and powerful telekinetic, ranging from blunt but powerful blows to subtle and inventive. One of his most impressive displays of telekinesis was during a mission to Felucia. While en route to the planet, his shuttle was sent into freefall. In order to prevent his death, Kenobi unleashed a force wave that uprooted several large trees, each larger than the shuttle itself, and then proceeded to carefully place the trees into position to break the shuttle's fall. This accomplishment was made all the more impressive by the fact that he was standing outside on the ship's hull, and therefore devoting most of his attention to simply staying in place. His most destructive ability was the Force Repulse, a gathered burst of Force energy that would send targets flying in all directions. Notably, Kenobi used this ability to defeat the known Jedi killer Dirge, blasting apart his body with such force that he liquefied most of Dirge's muscle tissue that made up his body. Kenobi was also highly skilled with Force throws, able to lift heavy objects and throw them with pinpoint accuracy at the desired target. Similarly, Kenobi was also a master of the saber throw, using telekinesis to manipulate his lightsaber mid-flight and take out multiple targets at once. While certainly not weak in grand-scale manipulation, Kenobi favored using subtlety to off-balance and expose his enemies. The greatest example of this would be when he used the Force to reverse the polarity of Anakin Skywalker's mechanical hand during their duel on Mustafar. Kenobi has also proven on multiple occasions that he can reliably penetrate the telekinetic defenses of opposing Force wielders. And though his passive Force shield strength is spotty at best, his active defense can block strikes from even the likes of Count Dooku and Darth Vader, and he is capable of using shields to defend himself from projectiles. Obi-Wan's strong connection to the living Force allowed him to develop into an advanced telepath. He was an expert at both the Jedi mind trick and the beast control ability. Additionally, the Clone Wars role-playing game handbook credits him with an immunity to fear effects. Although lacking any offensive-based energy attacks, Kenobi had some skill with Tutaminis, able to block multiple blaster bolts with ease, though more advanced applications seemed to elude him. Finally, Kenobi was capable of the rare art of sound mimicry. The power allowed the user to imitate any sound they had previously heard. While not lethal, it is easy to see how this ability could lead to an advantage for the user. Kenobi is most famous for his ability to transcend the physical plane as a Force spirit, surviving his death and retaining his individuality as an entity of the light side. While this ability has no known combative powers, it does speak volumes to his connection with the Force. At the end of the day, Obi-Wan Kenobi was a tactical and inventive Force wielder, the quintessential Jedi Guardian. With decades of training and study under her belt, Shaak Ti was unquestionably one of the most powerful Jedi of her era. Her advanced philosophical understanding of the Jedi arts earning her a seat on the Jedi Council. Her Togrutan nature granting her an instinctive closeness with her environment and strengthening her connection to the living Force. Ti's presence in the light side of the Force was so significant that she managed to influence the Force state of an entire planet of Felucia. Her influence was so significant, in fact, that after her death, the planet immediately fell to the dark side of the Force. Both Darth Vader and Galen Marek acknowledged her as a powerful Jedi Master, and stood as one of 3 council members to survive Order 66. Unlike the other prominent Lightsiders of her era, Shaak Ti is noted for the magnitude of her abilities rather than her range. She would compensate for her numerical lack of abilities to draw on by elevating the ones she did have to their highest possible application. Shaak Ti was prodigious with her Force-based augmentation, and this was only amplified by her Togrutan nature. Most notably, her physical augmentation allowed her to carry on a marathon lightsaber duel while full sprinting for upwards of 30 minutes, and then go on to fight an army of Magna Guards, only showing signs of fatigue after using an excessive application of Force speed that allowed her to run fast enough that she would appear as a blur to an observer. Shaak Ti was more than an advanced telekinetic, and her applications of the power range from the blunt and powerful to the subtle and inventive. Her baseline Force blasts were powerful enough to scatter large contingents of battle droids and create crater-sized blasts in stone walls, while during the first Battle of Kamino, her, along with Attack of the Clones era Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, meaning she was the most powerful one present at the time and therefore doing most of the heavy lifting, unleashed a Force wave that ruptured an access tunnel to an underwater cloning facility, and then held back the crushing force of the ocean until the opening was sealed off. On a more technical level, Shaak Ti possessed a highly advanced level of aptitude with Force throws, being able to throw a large amount of starship components in an attempt to subdue General Grievous. In addition, during her second duel with the General and his forces, she was observed using a saber throw along with telekinetically tying the General's cape around a maglev train to forcibly remove him from the battlefield. Shaak Ti has also shown proficiency at penetrating the telekinetic barriers of opponents, and while penetrating Galen Marek's wall of air is nothing to be proud of, she has reliably penetrating other adepts' walls on numerous occasions. Conversely, Shaak Ti's entry in the Power of the Jedi sourcebook credits her with advanced Force defenses, suggesting that your average Force wielder would have trouble penetrating her passive shield, while to a below-average Force wielder like Zane Carrot or Scout, she would be practically untouchable. Shaak Ti's telepathic abilities were highly advanced. Besides the Jedi mind trick, which most Jedi were capable of, she was also able to sustain a constant mental link with the native Felucians, as well as the Mega Sarlacc in the Ancient Abyss, all the while participating in her intense duel with Galen Merrick, compelling both to come to her aid and attack Merrick. Cycling back to the Power of the Jedi sourcebook, it also credits her with a proficiency in the healing arts, allowing her to heal herself while in the midst of combat. To round out her defense, Shaak Ti possesses Tutiminis during her first duel with General Grievous. She managed to stop the energy of the lightsaber, but it's not its kinetic force. Now here is where some speculation on my part comes into play. As we know, Shaak Ti was not operating at maximum capacity on Hypori, and what's more, she would have been even more exhausted by the end of the duel. Using these factors, I believe that Shaak Ti was capable of deflecting a lightsaber strike with Tutiminis in both kinetic and energy force. However, I do not believe that she can absorb the blade like Zatil Shan. I believe that she would use this power very sparingly, as it would be a tremendous drain on her Force resources. Therefore, it is my personal theory that she would only use Tutiminis as a last resort, when she cannot block or invade an incoming strike. Lastly, and unusually for a Jedi of her era, Shaak Ti is capable of offensive energy-based powers. Notably, during her duel with Galen Merrick, she seemingly used a power similar to Kinetite, in which she created explosive spheres of Force energy that she then hurled at Merrick, and detonated them in his vicinity. While there is some argument to whether Ti is capable of producing this power on worlds other than Felucia, it is my belief that she is capable of doing so, but simply had not fully developed this power until after Order 66. This verdict is simple to call, but the reason it is requires explanation. Kenobi and Shaak Ti have roughly equal levels of raw power, and both have a very diverse array of skill sets. The real deciding factor here comes in what exactly their powers do in a combative sense. On an even playing field, the beast trick, sound mimicry, and basic mind trick abilities will not come into play. Kenobi's Force Repulse is impressive, but it's nothing that Shaak Ti cannot match. It is unknown whether or not Kenobi's Tutiminis could absorb Shaak Ti's balls of energy, but whether he can or not is not what I focus this verdict on. The biggest difference between the two is their defensive capabilities. When it comes to telekinesis, Kenobi's active barrier is excellent, and he can deflect Force waves from the likes of Count Dooku and Anakin Skywalker, but his passive barrier is laughable, as every single competent Force wielder that has attempted to ragdoll him has succeeded in doing so, and this is not limited to the 2008 Clone Wars TV show. Therefore, for all of his developed power and subtle tricks, Kenobi can and will be beaten in this category the minute Shaak Ti decides to stop playing tricks and unleash her power on Kenobi, who will only be able to deflect it if he can get his active defense in place in time, and eventually he will make a mistake, and it will not come up in time. Shaak Ti gets the edge in Force abilities. Obi-Wan Kenobi wielded the standard Jedi lightsaber for his day, with the blue Ilum crystal for the focusing lens. Other than familiarity with his own handiwork, it provided no special benefit, and neither did his standard brown Jedi robes. Shaak Ti uses a standard lightsaber with the blue Ilum crystal, and it provides no extra benefits, and neither does her standard Jedi robes. Due to this, there will be no edge given for weapons and equipment. And now, the verdict. For this fight, Let's say it takes place in the Pelion Gardens on Bastion, with multiple loose objects of various sizes for the combatants to use. Additionally, let us assume that for the purpose of this fight, neither combatant recognizes the other, because one or both combatants recognizing each other would cause an uneven playing field. Additionally, neither combatant will have time to prepare for the battle, and the fight will start with both combatants in full view of each other. As a final tally for this matchup, I see the victor winning 6 times out of 10. This will be a description of one majority victory. Let us begin. In the early fight, I see there being no real way for either of the two combatants to best the other. Shaak Ti might have the edge in several categories, but none of them are particularly overwhelming. She might be able to eventually get past Kenobi's Saber Guard, but it certainly wouldn't be quick. She likewise might be capable of unleashing her raw power on Kenobi, but it would not take him out of the fight so early. Kenobi likewise is not an early fight combatant. He aims to wear his opponent down through attrition, waiting for them to make a mistake before closing in for the kill. Due to all these factors, I can safely conclude that there will be no advantage given in the early fight. The mid-fight is much the same as the early fight. I cannot stress enough just how even this fight is. Shaak Ti may have several advantages, but these are all by the skin of her teeth, as her skill set and physicality just so happen to play out in such a way that she is slightly more suited for confrontation with a Jedi such as Kenobi, in comparison to someone like Anakin Skywalker or Plo Koon. Despite these advantages, Shaak would not be controlling the fight, as Kenobi is every bit of a tactical fighter as her, and they would be playing mind games with each other as they dance across the battlefield. Kenobi, likewise, would ensure that Ti took every bit as much damage as he did, and this would cause both to continue wearing down as the fight turned from a fast-paced duel into a marathon slugging match, and as such I cannot see the fight ending in the mid-fight either. The late fight would be where the real meat of the action took place, with each combatant showing off every bit of their skill set as they work to take their opponent down. Shaak would likely start unleashing her force abilities in a more direct manner, no longer attempting to subtly undermine, but rather overwhelm her opponent, as her tricks were getting her nowhere. Kenobi may try to do the same, and while it is possible he could match Ti in terms of telekinetic power, he falls short in the realm of defenses and energy-based powers. In terms of Saber's skills, Kenobi will be able to hold his own for a long time, but there will come a point where he must go on the offensive in order to emerge victorious, and I simply do not see him being able to outwit Shaak Ti in this regard. In the end, I award Kenobi 4 possible victories in the late fight due to the fact that he is so close to Shaak Ti in terms of skill and power level. This is a fight where Shaak Ti has to do everything right in order to win, with just one mistake on her part leading to a loss. Unfortunately for Kenobi, if both combatants perform perfectly, then I cannot see him overcoming Shaak Ti, and so I will reward the 6 remaining scenarios to Shaak Ti. And thus, I declare Jedi Master Shaak Ti the victor. As for the explanation for the verdict, the best analogy I've been able to come up with is Kenobi's fight against Dooku. Shaak Ti and Dooku are very similar combatants in that they both are very strong in the Force and both have a Makashi-based dueling style. That being said, Shaak Ti and Dooku are not equal combatants in terms of tier, with Dooku being at roughly tier 1.5 and Shaak Ti being at a solid tier 2. This is due to Dooku's greater power in the Force, enhanced combative viability in regard to Force powers, and his extreme level of technical skill. However, where Shaak Ti lacks in comparison to Dooku, she makes up for in other areas. While she might not be as technically skilled with Makashi as Dooku, she has added other forms to throw off her enemies off balance. She has a much tougher physicality, with her natural traits as a Togruta enhancing her endurance and allowing her passive echolocation. She may be less powerful than Dooku, but she is much more inventive with her power, not looking to blast away her opponent, but instead allowing them to be the architect of their own demise. How Dooku bested Kenobi on the invisible hand is roughly how I see Shaak Ti defeating Kenobi. She would pick apart his defenses before either grazing him with her lightsaber or blasting him away with telekinesis. However, unlike the duel on the invisible hand, Shaak Ti would be much harder pressed to actually achieve this. Dooku managed to defeat Kenobi without any noticeable injuries, and with only some fatigue, which is notable considering his advanced age. Shaak Ti, on the other hand, would be left battered, bleeding, and utterly exhausted by this engagement. But, at the end of the day, she would still be victorious. I would once again like to thank Piotr Kirkzewski, even though I'm sure he just butchered his name, but I would like to thank him for suggesting this matchup, and while Season 2's roster is filled out, requests can still be made for Season 3, as that season's roster will not be finalized until I have completed Season 2. Additionally, I feel as though I should explain some of my personal rules in regards to deciding on matchups, so that some suggestions are more easily accepted and turned into videos. The first thing I do when deciding on a matchup is that I type it into the YouTube search bar and I see if it has been done before. If it hasn't, I will queue it up in my personal list to be turned into a video at some point. If it has, I then check the date on the video. Some videos are almost a decade old, and so I don't mind redoing a matchup, as there has probably been plenty of added material in the past decade, as Legends did not end until 2014. If it is a newer video, I will then check the video to see if I agree or disagree with the video. If I disagree with the video, I'll make sure that a few months have gone by since the original was published, and then I'll make my own. If I agree with the video's verdict, I likely will not want to touch that matchup again for a while, as I would just end up repeating whatever the original poster's opinions were since I agreed with them. Therefore, if you are suggesting a matchup, I do not necessarily mind if it was done before, and I may choose to do it, but I will sometimes not do a proposal because I want to avoid being an echo chamber. Moving on, please keep in mind that this is all my opinion, and feel free to leave comments, criticisms, or suggestions for future matchups in the comments down below. This is the Phoenix Exalt, signing out, and may the Force be with you, always.